I think that all of us are aware that food waste is becoming a critical problem around the globe, not just in Europe. Therefore, it's our responsibility to act. The exponential growth in food waste is imposing serious threats to our society in the form of environmental pollution, such as plastic contaminations in soil, which we'll discuss today, and health risk. Beside the food and land resources wastage, the carbon footprint of food waste is estimated to contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions by accumulating approximately 3.3 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere per year. Therefore, we must move from the mindset of waste being a problem to seeing waste as a resource. As as we all know, that anaerobic digestion approach is one of the most eco-friendly and promising solutions for food waste management, energy and nutrition production, which can also contribute to world's ever-increasing energy requirements. The objective of the adopted circular economy package, which will be upgraded with the proposal of circular economy action plan and farm to fork strategy, can be achieved through the development of collection schemes from mixed biodegradable waste, including food waste, and finding alternative waste management routes, including composting, anaerobic digestion, and incineration. Both waste prevention as well as widespread growth in circular economy activities will require a coherent and holistic approach that takes a recovery option into account at every stage of the product life cycle. Cooperation is also needed between the waste industry and the enterprise engaged in circular economy business model. Collecting high-quality waste streams for reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling also requires citizen engagement in integrated infrastructure developed from the municipal to EU level. Knowledge sharing and good practices can also help. Perhaps a case of my own country, Slovenia, can be an inspiration to some other member states which are lagging behind the waste management goals. Not only we have the world's best cyclists who are winning the Tour de France, we are also one of the EU member states with most efficient waste management system. In 2016, our capital, Ljubljana, has been awarded as the European Green Capital and the first European capital to move towards zero waste. The national trends are also encouraging. Even though the volume of municipal waste is increasing, 495 kilo per capita in 2018, the volume of dumped waste is falling, only 28 kilo of deposited waste per capita, meaning less than 4% of collected municipal waste are deposited on landfill. This reflects the trend in Slovenia toward greater shares of recycling, in particular made possible by separate collection of municipal waste. 71% of municipal waste are collected separately. As you can see, we are way ahead of EU targets and will continue to follow this path to zero waste society. I'm sure other EU member states will follow our example. As mentioned at the beginning, the objective of my opening address was to give you a broader overview of waste management policies in the EU, while the details of today's topics will be discussed by our panelists. Thank you for your attention, and David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bogovič, for this really interesting introduction. And it is clear that when you travel around the world, you see that European legislation is at the forefront of environmental protection and waste management. And wherever I go around the world, people look to the EU for leadership. I am going to give you now some slides to indicate why I feel this issue is an important issue. what I'm going to talk about here are the current food waste regimes we have, the food waste collection regimes we will get post-2023, the quality of collections and the implications and the projections that that makes, and then what we need to do before we go much further. Now, you may ask, why should I be interested in this? As Marco Ricci knows from Italy, I've been involved in the biowaste collection and treatment systems of Italy since the late 1990s. Former president of the International Solid Waste Association and president of the World Biogas Association, and the managing director of this association in the UK, BBIA, which is all to do with the biowaste sector. And I'm very concerned about my industry. I know my industry very well, and this is why, with Mr. Pellegrini back in January, I raised the issue of food waste collections. Food waste collections, ladies and gentlemen, are a fantastic opportunity. We are losing a great deal of topsoil from crop harvesting across the EU, and putting organic carbon from compost back to soil is one way of substituting and increasing the organic carbon we have in our soils. As the data show, we sent 50 million tons of food waste last year to incineration and landfill instead of into treatment. And after 2023, that will stop as we collect food waste across the EU separately. And we can generate biogas, biomethane, we can produce lots of compost, put organic carbon back to soil, and of course we can also use the CO2 that we make from biogas and take that CO2 out and use that for industrial purposes. So doing all this will help us meet our greenhouse gas emissions targets, and it's great for soil, it's great for restoring that soil-to-soil circular loop which urbanization broke 100 or so years ago. Now, this is where technology, yes, here we are. We have to ensure, however, that what we put to soil is clean. A few weeks ago, Zero Waste Europe and BIC reported on the potential of food waste, and as you can see from this data, only 16% of food waste, of bio-waste across the EU, is currently intercepted and collected separately. So with the new legislation, which Mr. Bogovič pointed out, this should increase by about 5 times. And this shows the need and the investment that there is across the EU to strengthen bio-waste collections. So of the 9.5 million tons which the EU 27 currently captures in food waste, 16% of the total, well, 2/3 of that is in Italy. And so if we look to Italy about what they have done there, we can have a fair idea about what the future holds for us. Now, Marco Ricci will be talking about the Italian case in a minute, but I have to mention it now because it is a very important guideline for our future. Italy's association, CIC, which Marco represents and which I used to be the managing director of, has shown data recently that shows that going into that food waste collection system in Italy today, we have around about 100,000 tons of plastics. Now, you can't compost plastics, you can't make biogas from plastics, you have to take them out. And when you take the plastics out, you also drag and extract around 5 to 10% of food waste. Now, the calculation which CIC made just recently was that this costs around about €100 million a year to the food waste system. So in other words, plastic extraction costs 100 million a year in Italy. Now, that's an economic cost, and it would be perhaps even greater had Italy not introduced the law in 2010, which said that food waste has to be collected either with a reusable container or with a compostable bag. And so what that law in 2010 means today is that Italy has a very, very low contamination of plastics overall. Very pure collections, very low contamination levels, and Marco will talk about that data in a minute. But it's still a problem. What that problem would be, across the EU, even with the low contamination levels which Italy has. If Italy spends roughly €100 million a year to take out the 100,000 tons of plastic from its food waste, we can calculate that, assuming a low contamination level as such as Italy has, the EU will spend about €1 billion a year to take plastics out after 2023. That's about 750,000 tons of plastic, which means that the bio-waste system has to take out to be able to treat its bio-waste. So whilst we're talking in the Single-Use Plastic Directive about our attempts to reduce plastic waste, we are ignoring one of the largest single unnoticed disposals of plastic waste in the EU into bio-waste treatment. And economically, that's a disaster for my industry. That's a disaster for anaerobic digestion and composting. But it's also bad for EU citizens because they will have to pay those costs. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is a best case scenario based upon Italy's low contamination rate. What if that contamination were higher? What if we were not getting 1.5% of plastic, but we were getting 5% of plastic? That would mean some 2.5 million tons of plastic would go into bio-waste treatment systems post-2023. Why 5%? Well, in the UK, and I'm sure in many other countries, 5% is the legal obligation of contractual arrangements between councils and bio-waste factories, bio-waste treatment plants. So a council can deliver up to 5% plastic contamination. As we will see in Catalonia, in Spain, it can be far, far more. And the cost to citizens across the EU would be somewhere in the region of €2 to €2.5 billion a year. And the cost to the bio-waste system to take that plastic out, to incinerate it and send it to landfill is that. And it means the plastic industry is transferring to the bio-waste industry its plastic waste free of charge. So this is the potential cost, ladies and gentlemen, if we have 5% impurities in our collection system. But there's an environmental problem. Now, the AD and the compost plants in the whole of Europe do a fantastic job of getting plastics out of contaminated food waste. They are really good at it, but they should not have to do this job. They're bio-waste plants. They're not plastic waste treatment plants. And as more plastics enter the system in the collections, the more difficult it will be for them to extract them. So inevitably, more plastics will go to soil. And if we look at studies from the UK Environmental Agency, from the European Environmental Agency itself, from the Beirut University, we're already seeing worrying levels of plastic contamination to farmlands, some of which is coming from compost and digestate. Most comes from tires, from car tires, but some is coming from compost and digestate. We cannot allow that to increase as a consequence of increased food waste collections. That would be negligent. And the EU, the EA in England, the Environment Agency, shows quite clearly that if the quality of food waste is this on your left, then the inevitable consequence is contamination to soil from plastics. So we have to get those plastics out. Now, I mentioned Catalonia. Zero Waste Europe reported in 2019 that overall contamination levels of plastic in food waste in Catalonia are as much as 22%. And this is due to people using ordinary non-compostable plastic bags in food waste collections. Now, this is what we have to expect for the future unless we get a grip of it now. This is disastrous for our environment. So we must intervene now before food waste collections are mandated to stop plastics going to soil. I strongly suggest and ask that the Commission mandates a similar law to Italy's law to ban the use of non-compostable plastics in bio-waste collections and to introduce the Italian regulation across the EU 27. I strongly suggest that the Fertilizer Directive is revised to reduce the input contamination permitted for the production of organic fertilizers. In England, the Environment Agency is looking at stipulating a maximum of 0.5% plastic input contamination by 2025. And while I know we're no longer part of the European Union, but if the English can do it, everybody else can. And I strongly suggest that there is a review before 2023 of the Fertilizer Directive, where outputs to soil of plastic are currently allowed or falling to 0.25%. Scotland has just mandated that plastic output to soil is reduced to 0.06% from last year. It can be done. We need to do it immediately. These are some of the sources, ladies and gentlemen, which I have calculated, which I have used in my presentation, which you can access. And here's how you can get hold of me for any further information. I thank you for that. And I am now going to invite as a speaker to give us an illustration of what is happening in Italy. Marco Ricci Jurgensen, he's the chair of the working group on bio-waste at ISVA. He's also at the European Compost Network. He's the senior expert at CIC in Italy and has been doing this work especially on bio-waste for as long as me, about 20 odd years. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and let me thank the European Parliament Group on Bioeconomy to have the possibility to express our point of view. Give me just a second. I'm trying to share screen.
Marco, just a second. Can I ask everybody listening, please, to make sure your microphones are turned off, because we do have some background disturbance. Thank you.
Okay. You should be able to see my screen now. I hope so, at least. Could you please confirm, David? Okay.
Yes.
I will start immediately because I know that we have to keep to a very strict timing. It is a country, when you talk to experts about waste management in Italy and you name the word waste, be aware that normally Italians understand under the term bio-waste, waste collection. Food waste has been collected in Italy since almost 30 years now, and our organization, the Italian Composting and Biogas Association, has been involved since almost 30 years in promoting this collection being efficient and economically sustainable. I'm switching what we do. We are at Italian level and at the international level. Why we choose Italy as a key example about how food waste can be collected efficiently. Just starting to look at national data. Most of the organic waste, of waste, which is collected in Italy is food waste, as you can see from this data. And we transform these amounts, which are collected separately in cities and towns, into compost. Just for you to know, as a background information, the Italian anaerobic digestion facilities are usually coupled to post-composting of the digestate. This has some strategical advantages once it comes to the collection of waste with, for example, compostable polymers and so on. We are a country that is still expecting a significant increase in bio-waste collection, and we expect to reach to 9 million tons per year by 2025. Let's share a few facts about how we were able to limit the amount of plastic contaminants in the final product of our recycling process, which is compost. And let me move also outside Italy, because it's not only Italians which can do that. There's for sure one fact that some biowaste collection schemes may not be able to efficiently divert biowaste from disposal to recycling. This is a very recent analysis published by the German UBA, which shows that we need everywhere in Europe, including Italy, look carefully at our collection schemes, being able to divert better quality amounts of waste from disposal towards separate collection and recycling. What we learned in Italy, and we started in other countries, so we learned from the experience of others, is that in cities, some schemes work better. For example, curbside schemes, door-to-door collection schemes, are significantly better performing in terms of amounts of food waste collected. These data are in kilogram per person, and in terms of impurities which are brought into the recycling facility, a feedstock, unfortunately. So we have abandoned bring schemes in the last 10 years systematically all over Italy, even if they're still working. The second aspect is we need to be sure that quality starts from the household, from the kitchen. And surprisingly, these kind of tools can be found all over Europe now. It's not only an recipe, but I may say that like some good tasting pasta or pizza, it's an Italian recipe applied elsewhere. So these are kitchen caddies, which you can find in significant cities around Europe. And the standard input is you need to equip households with compostable liners to be sure that the bag becomes an advantage for households to sort organic food waste and not a disturbing factor, a limiting factor for the recycling, so for composting and digestion. We also know that normally these tools, these bags, paper or compostable plastic, certified compostable plastics, enhance user participation. I quote data from Germany because they are probably more recent than the Italian ones, and we know that where being applied, well, the amounts rise. And no surprise, this can happen also in Eastern Europe. This is one of the best practice cases we are monitoring from abroad, from Romania, countries European but out of the European Union. And of course, I think David mentioned them before, friends in Catalonia, which were the first one going on door-to-door collection, trying to make, first of all, the household and the producer responsible for the quality of the organic waste they do sort. But at the end of the day, in a circular perspective, the quality of the feedstock makes the quality of the product. And it can't depend only on the composting sector alone. This is a very basic image which shows how a chain for compost and of course for biogas production may look like. And we know that the compost facility is the significant player of this circularity, but the choices of biowaste producers, the choices how to collect biowaste, the type of bags which are available to households to sort organic waste, well, all these influence the output of our facilities, compost and compost market. No surprise that I would say all organizations in Europe have quality assurance schemes. The ones I'm quoting here, referring to which are applying the European compost export standard. What we do in addition in Italy is that we are monitoring heavily the quality of the feedstock coming into our facilities. Our organization performs up to 1,000 bio-waste compositions per year. So, for example, we know that today, 2019, we have more bioplastics coming into our facilities than plastics. But plastics are there, and plastic do represent 60% of the feedstock impurities. So they are the major impurity and disturbing factor for our working process. We also know that thanks to the legislation which we put in place between 2000 and 2012, we were able to significantly reduce the amounts of conventional plastics, which are incorrectly collected together with food waste. So it is a well-performing case, but we still have to work on that because we want to reduce the 60% feedstock impurity, which is represented by plastics. As Mr. Newman said before, we are not happy with that because it implies that a composting facility needs to have additional elements for pre-treatment, for refining of compost, and of course, impurities have a lagging effect, which means that we lose compost, which is one of our outputs, or if a combined biogas and composting facility, we lose biogas. And of course, we have rejects, and rejects are very expensive to dispose of. And I confirm our costs for managing plastic food waste roughly around 100 million euro per year. So prevention is it. How can we do that? Of course, preventing conventional plastic to come into the scheme and thinking carefully of alternatives, being sure they are compatible with the composting process. Our facilities are able to remove roughly 90% of the conventional during the recycling process. And so we try our best to prevent that compost becomes a vector for bringing conventional plastics onto soil. Last, we performed a national survey involving facilities which treat almost 2 million tons per annum of organic waste, of bio-waste. And we were able to quantify the amounts of plastics which are brought into the scheme. And we're also able to see that we are bringing into compost roughly 0.6 gram per kilogram of plastic impurities, which is at the time being significantly lower than the limit value for plastic, which has been established by the European EU fertilizer regulation. Even though we are not happy about that, and we would like to minimize it as soon as possible, but there are some things can be done by technologies, others must be done by a teamwork between all the actors of the recycling sectors. Let me just spend a word on compostable plastic because they are part of this. They are an effective tool in Italy for collecting food waste. And then coming to the end, during our investigation, we monitored facilities which are treating up to 0.6 million tons of bio-waste per year. And we were looking for compost plastics in compost because this was an important factor for us. And all that we have done show that compostable plastics are complying with industrial composting processes. So from that point of view, we are sure that they help us to better sort organic waste, but at the same time, if the composting facilities are run correctly, they are fully compatible and do not end up as rejects in final compost. My conclusions are that, of course, recycling targets and obligation for bio-waste must have food waste as a pivotal fraction to be collected separately. This is something we do in Italy since 2012, and we are very happy about the amended European legislation which obliges all member states to collect organic waste by 2023. Actually, this deadline has been applied also in Italy now, starting from 2021. Towns and cities in Europe, in experience, have proven to be successful in collecting food waste in terms of amounts, quantity, and partition, as long as the scheme has been designed correctly. You can't ask technology to do miracles. So the quality of the output, being it digested, being it compost, depends strictly on the feedstock impurities. So if we want to have a clean feedstock, we have to prevent impurities to be delivered at the gate of recycling. Compost is a victim of plastics, of conventional plastics, and the composting sector is committed, as far as I know, globally in Europe, to maximize its effort for a quality cost. It does it in a number of ways, but of course, it cannot be blamed for the quality of the feedstock. Compostable bags made of paper or made of compostable plastics, both applying to the European 13432 standards, represent, in our experience in Italy and also from my activities outside of Italy, a very proven, useful tool to enhance participation of users in collecting separately food waste, in bringing it to recycling schemes, and fulfilling the recycling targets that are the regional or national level. Again, thank you very much for hosting us, and let me also add my greetings from our Managing Director, Dr. Massimo Centemero, which was unable to join today, but which is keen and is available for any further information through contact details. Again, thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for being with us, and please remain with us, because what I will do, ladies and gentlemen, is allow all the speakers to speak first and then ask them to come back into a panel so that you can shoot your questions at them after you've heard all the speakers. Our next speaker to welcome if you are ready, Dr. Pellegrini is the head of the unit of waste management and secondary raw materials at DG Environment at the Commission. He has worked as the head of cabinet of the Commissioner Nelly Ferrocci, and was a member of the cabinet of the Vice President of the Commission. Has a degree in law, European legal studies, and has a postgraduate diploma at the Lewis University in Rome. And so Mr. Pellegrini knows his way around the European Commission and has long experience there of the legislation process. Mr. Pellegrini, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. I'm just trying.
I welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Okay, so good morning, everybody, and I'll use a PowerPoint presentation, and thanks for the invitation. So indeed, I'm the head of unit of the unit which is in charge of waste management and secondary raw materials. I took up this job in end of December of last year. It seems ages, although it's been less than a year, due to not only to COVID, but really to the tsunami of legislation that is that we have in my team. So this is one of the many different files that have to deal, and we are under enormous priority now to deliver on the revision of the batteries directive, so the famous batteries regulation. So you can imagine. But I thought that it would be important also to follow that and to listen carefully. I already had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Newman, so that's and also to listen to this problem of contamination, potential contamination of plastics. But if we move to the first slides, indeed, I don't need to repeat here. I think Mr. Bogovič was very clear. There is a strong focus of this Commission on circular economy as part of the European Green Deal. As you know, a circular economy action plan was adopted on the 11th of March of this year. I've been many years ago already once in DG Environment, and now I'm back to DG Environment after a number of years, and I can tell you that the situation has radically changed from a sort of minor DG located in Beaulieu, is now really one of the core DGs in delivering the priority #1 of this Commission, which is the European Green Deal, and we're very privileged for that. From a staffing point of view, I must say that we do not have the relevant staff to do that, but that's I'm mentioning always that point because I really want that you NGOs, members of parliament, always insist with our political leaders in the Commission that being the priority #1 of the Commission means also to be the priority #1 in terms of allocation of staff, which sometimes is not really the case. So, but we do our best. We try to work 24 hours per day, but it's not very healthy, but that is what is happening often on our side. So I mentioned the Circular Economy Action Plan. I think I want just to focus on a couple of points. As you know, it's a set of actions, but I think the most important thing is that there is a clear focus on key product value chains. I mentioned batteries, but one of them is also food. So food is clearly highlighted as one of the key priority in terms of key value chains for circular economy. And also what I want to mention is that clearly there is a focus not only on waste management, but also on waste prevention, so on less waste. So that's even with the idea that the Commission may set in the revision of the Waste Framework Directive, may come up with new targets on waste prevention. At the moment, as you know, we do not have targets for waste prevention. We have targets for recycling, but not targets for reuse and recycling, but not targets for waste prevention. In terms of waste policy, indeed, I mentioned that waste prevention is one of the priority of the new Circular Economy Action Plan. Also, there is a number of legislative changes of the EU waste law, from batteries all the way down to electric, to end-of-life vehicles. But more important, and is relevant for the discussion we're having today, there is also this idea of harmonizing the waste collection systems by 2022. So to come up with a proposal to harmonize the waste collection systems, and also to enhance EPR, extended producer responsibility schemes, notably in the field of EPR schemes. The focus will be on eco-modulation. So how can we establish a better system for eco-modulation? So that's, I mean, there are other areas of activities, but are less relevant for today's discussion. Indeed, I mean, the issue of food waste and how to reduce it is one of the priority of also the other strategy, the farm to fork strategy, because indeed, I mean, each of us waste, I mean, when I saw that number the first time, I was a bit shocked. I mean, 173 kilograms per person are wasted in the value chain, and this is about 20% of all the food which is produced in Europe, so 1 out of 5. So that clearly shows that there is a need of action. If we look at what has been done in the 2018 waste package, because we should not forget that we have this ambitious agenda on waste under the new Circular Economy Action Plan, but the Parliament and the Council have agreed already at the end of the last Commission to already a big comprehensive waste package, so to the revision of the Waste Framework Directive. And as part of that, there is this gradual progress towards a 65% of overall recycling of municipal waste, the famous target of only having 10% of landfill by 2035, but also the target of 70% of recycling of packaging waste by 2030. And also the invitation to member states to already start to adopt waste prevention measures, reinforce rule on both on separate collection and extended producer responsibility, and phasing out the landfill of all recoverable waste. So there is already rather, especially as regards landfill and municipal waste and also packaging waste, a rather ambitious agenda which is ongoing, which is already part of the 2018 review. Now, if we move to bio-waste and circular economy, indeed, as it was said by previous speakers, bio-waste can play an important role in the transition to circular economy. Why bio-waste is so important? Because when we look at European data, bio-waste represent 34% of all the municipal solid waste which is generated. So indeed is the largest fraction. So we really need to make sure that this is brought back to and recycled into the value back into the value chain. What are the relevant provisions of the new Waste Framework Directive? The one was adopted by the co-legislator in 2018. And I think Mr. Newman has already referred to some of the elements. So the first important element is that there is a target to reduce food waste by 2030 by half. And this is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. There is an obligation on member states to start reporting generation annually to the European Commission, starting from 2020. But then more importantly, there is also a mandate for the European Commission to propose a binding target for food waste reduction by the end of 2023. So on that specific target, we're working together with our colleagues in DG Santé, and we are exploring that in view of a potential revision of the Waste Framework Directive in order to include a specific target on food waste reduction. And also, and this is particularly relevant for today's discussion, there is an obligation for all the EU member states to collect separately bio-waste and to ensure recycling. And this is by the end of 2023. and then therefore to ensure that it's not incinerated. So we will have this new obligation kicking in, which is already in the current revision of the Waste Framework Directive, to separately collect bio-waste. As you know, this, as I mentioned earlier on, this is particularly important because this is the largest component of municipal waste, which until now was not subject to obligation of separate collection, although in a number of member states there are already systems. I mean, we've been just listening to the Italian system, but in a number of member states there is already separate collection of bio-waste. But in a few years' time, this will become not anymore an option. It will become a legally binding, let's say, requirement under EU legislation. Also, what is important is that member states, in terms also of accountability, as of 1st of January 2027, will only be able to count municipal bio-waste entering an aerobic or anaerobic treatment as recycled if it has been separated, separately collected or separated at sources. So that is very important. That means that not only there will be an obligation to have separate collection systems, but also there will be a few years after, in 2027, there will be an obligation. An obligation. Member states will only be able to, in their statistics, to account for municipal bio-waste which has either been separately collected or separated as source. Indeed, also what is important is that the Commission, in addition to discuss a possible target on food waste reduction, as I mentioned, in the potential revision of the Waste Framework Directive, it is also asked to consider by December 2024 a possibility to have recycling targets for municipal bio-waste. This is normally the way all our waste legislation is done. First, there is an obligation, like in this case, of separate collection, and then a few years after, there is also an obligation to reach a certain target. And more importantly, so this is also relevant with this idea that we were discussing about possible contamination of the section of bio-waste. There is a clear article in the directive that says that only waste with similar biodegradability and compostability properties can be collected together with bio-waste. So that's, I think, are all relevant provisions which are new to the Waste Framework Directive, which are relevant for the discussion we're having today. I will jump here, indeed, and I will stop here. This is particularly relevant because, indeed, it shows a bit of what the previous speakers were saying, that you have some countries, notably also the country of Mr. Bogovič, Slovenia, but also Austria, which they have a very high collection rate. Italy is another one. I mean, we were just discussing, but then unfortunately we have situations in Europe, if you look at the bottom, Spain or Greece or Cyprus, where several collection at the moment it is less than 10%. So that shows that there is really a huge difference in the different member states of the Union. But of course, now all member states will have this obligation from 2023 to separate collect. And then the Commission will also consider at a later stage the possibility of a target. You can imagine that setting a target with such a difference among member states, it will not be an easy job, but it's something which the legislator has asked the European Commission to look into it. I mean, yeah, indeed, I mean, Italy was mentioned here. I don't go into the details, but it is interesting, the case of the city of Milan, that since already 2014 has reached 100% collection of food and organic waste. So that's, I think it shows that you can even have individual cases where we go far beyond even at the 80%, but we can reach even 100%. Final point I wanted to mention, indeed, is this, I mentioned in my slide on circular economy, the Commission is going to work towards, and we're working on it, and we know that especially Executive Vice President Timmermans is strongly attached to that, a proposal to harmonize several collection systems in 2022. So the idea is to look at the different good practices which exist in the different member states, and to see how to best combine these different collection models. Of course, always taking into account the regional and the local dimension of waste collection, but I think that's is a very important thing. So we are also considering as part of this, even to not only to harmonize the, as I said, the rules, but even things like the colors. As you know, at the moment you have different bags for the different, you have different rules and different bags for the different waste streams across the different member states. So indeed, to facilitate consumer involvement, you may go, an harmonized system would allow to do pan-European campaigns. A final point, maybe as a matter of conclusion, indeed, I've been listening carefully to the three suggestions by Mr. Newman. I cannot really reply on food on the fertilizer regulation because this is the competence of my colleagues in the GRO. As regards the first recommendation, which is to have a European law, which is basically copy and paste the Italian law to ensure purity of food waste collection. This indeed would be something which will fall within the remits of my team, of my unit. It is something which indeed, as Mr. Newman said, he had the opportunity to draw our attention prior to COVID at the beginning of this year. It's something which we are looking into it in terms also of, first, I think we need to verify the data of Mr. Newman, but I think it is important first to look at the magnitude of the problem, but then of course, then we can look into the solution. I just want to remind as well, as part of this point, that the Waste Framework Directive already established a principle that waste with similar biodegradability and compostability criteria can be collected together. This means, if you reason a contrario, that bags which do not biodegrade in industrial setting or in relevant waste treatment process cannot be used to pollute a specific stream. So that's, I think, it is important that not all type of bags can be used, because that is already now not allowed under the Waste Framework Directive. But also, the Commission has published a study in the context on the ongoing work on the revision of the Packaging Directive on the relevance of biodegradable and compostable consumer plastic products and packaging into the circular economy. So that is also, I will not go into the detail of that, but it's also relevant. And finally, I want to mention that by 2021, the Commission is going to put forward a framework on sourcing, labeling, and use of bio-based plastics, as well on the use of biodegradable and compostable plastic. So that framework will also be relevant, and this type of let's say, concern which has been expressed today can be taken into account when the Commission is going to put forward this framework in 2021 on biodegradable plastic. So with that, I think some of the things I've referred to it, they are in these slides. And as I said, I will make available my presentation to the organizer, and I'll do my best to stay as much as possible, but unfortunately I also have a parallel meeting soon. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pellegrini. Very much appreciate your comments. And before you do leave, I would like that clarification, because the Waste Framework Directive says that it is left up to individual member nations to decide whether they may collect compostable materials with bio-waste. But there is nothing in the reading of the Waste Framework Directive that I can see which says that they may not collect, they shall not collect bio-waste with, for example, plastics. It is intuitive, but it is not explicit.
Indeed, you are right. That's the reason why I said it can be read a contrario. So that's so legally you could. I mean, we believe that that interpretation that I just mentioned, although not clearly said, a contrario, you could lead. You can conclude in that way.
Okay, well, I think there is a very simple point that we can clarify, I hope that you can remain with us for the other two speakers and for the panel discussion. But when you have to leave, please do, and we thank you on behalf of everybody. Now we have two more speakers to talk to us about their experience on food waste collections. I'm very pleased to introduce Liliana Nikita, who is the director of the Federation of the Intercommunity Development Associations in Romania. Liliana has worked for 20 years or more in waste management, both as a public servant within the Ministry of Economy and also she's also a member of the ISVA working group on legal issues and governance. Therefore we have a little bit of history together, and it's very, very nice to be able to welcome you again, Liliana. Tell us briefly about the experience in Romania as one of the countries which Dr. Pellegrini shows still has a long way to go.
Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm very honored, and thank you for the invitation. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah?
Yes, perfect.
Yes. I would like to share my experience. We have it in Romania related to bio-waste. Of course, we were not able to achieve those very good results as we saw in Slovenia or in Austria, but we did already some steps. And for a good start, I will give you some general information. We are 20 million inhabitants in Romania, about. 50% are living in rural areas. This is good in certain way. And what is also good from our point of view, we are generating 5 million tons of municipal waste every year. This is not a very big quantity, as most of you know, Romania generated the less municipal waste per inhabitant in European Union. So we did somehow our part of prevention. But what is not working very good is separate collection. It's only partly developed, less in rural area. And what is very, very important to mention is we still have more than 80% of municipal waste sent to landfill. And this is our big problem now. And as you can see, looking to the composition of municipal waste, more than half is bio-waste. This means we have to do something with this bio-waste to divert from landfill. In Romania, as in other countries, municipal waste it's a job for local authorities, and in our case we have at county level, which means these small areas you can see here on a map. We have 40 counties in Romania, and as you can see here on the map, only on 11 counties we have a separate collection bio-waste for urban areas foreseen in our actual projects. We have it in place. And I mentioned before that half of the population are living. I mentioned before that half of the population is living in rural area, and now about 1 million of composting unit has been spread around the country, and having a total volume around 260,000 cubic meters. This means people living in rural area, they usually use the home composting. This is something that we encourage to be done. And for urban areas and in this case, separate collection is the option and composting in large facilities. This year, we starting actually in August has been adopted. We have a law for compostable waste. We call it compost law. And starting January next year, in our case, separate collection is mandatory. And local authorities, they have to organize the system of separate collection at source. And in many cases and in many cities, they already do this. But now, according to the law, everybody starting next year have to separate the bio waste at source. What is also important in this law, it's conformity certification of waste that has to be sent to the composting facilities or anaerobic digestion plants. Some details will be we will have in technical norms that should be adopted at latest in January next year. And also in these norms, we will have also legal limits for all contaminants. So far we don't have, let's say, any provision regarding to plastic waste contamination in compost. A few things about what we already have now in place. You can see in this picture here below, this is an image from one of our facilities in the middle of the country, in Sibiu County, actually. And you can see here the bio-waste collected separately from households. And of course, it's easily to see that plastic bags are present there. And here on the right, they are the composting plant. The total capacity, we have it now in the country, it's around 380,000 tons per year. And this capacity covers only 10% of the total quantity we generated in 2014. According to our national waste management action plan, 8% it's a composting rate in our case. Of course, in the coming period, in coming years, all these capacities will be increased up to 1.4 million tons. And we are looking forward for this new construction plans because taking into account that starting next year we will increase the quantities separately collected of bio waste, we have to treat this waste somewhere. And yeah, normally the plastics it's removed during the screening phase, but as you know, microplastics we cannot cannot be removed in this phase. Just few words about economic instruments we are having in place. Local authorities, why they should be involved and why they should be encouraged to do something related to the waste management. This is happening because there is a landfill tax that has to be paid by local authorities. It's about 10 euros per ton. And this is related to the quantity or the percentage of waste which is diverted from landfill. The target for 2019, it was 42%. And for this year, this target is 60%. What I have also to mention is that from this 60%, 50% has to be done through recycling. So recycling, classic recycling for plastic, metal, and other materials, and also composting of bio-waste. We have also some other instrument, we call it circular economy contribution. It's some kind of tax, but we don't like this word, so we use the word contribution. It's 6 euro per ton for waste that is sent to the landfill in 2019. And for this year, it's 16 euros per ton. But what is important is that this money has to be paid by the landfill owners or administrators. So in first case, the landfill tax is paid by local authorities, and in the second case by owners or administrators of landfill. We have also pay-as-you-throw applicable starting last year. It's working in some counties, not everywhere, or at least not yet. But all these instruments together, they succeeded somehow to move our local politicians to do something regarding to waste management. And I think this is the good way. As I mentioned at the beginning, we were not able to achieve very good results so far, but I think the way we are moving now is the right way. So this from my side. I assume I didn't take too much from your time.
No,
thank you.
We are here to listen to you, so it has been a pleasure. Thank you, Liliane, and please remain with us for the panel. Now, I see that quite a few people have joined us in the last few minutes, and this is because the original hour for this webinar was scheduled at 2 p.m. European time, but then because of Mr. Bogovič's appointments in the Parliament, we had to bring it forward an hour. So I apologize to those of you who didn't realize that we already started the presentations an hour ago, and many of those presentations, all those presentations will be available to you online very shortly. Last but certainly not least, Harman Dekker, the Managing Director of EBA and somebody at the European Biogas Association, and a professional who has worked in the biogas industry for many years. Harman, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, David, for the introduction, and also thank you for from the Bioeconomy Working Group, the European Parliament, to having us here. I'm trying to share my screen, see if all is going to work now. Could you confirm, David, that you can see it? Yep, all right, okay. So let me just share just a brief overview, as there have been a few speakers already also indicating the importance of nutrients and bioenergy from the food waste. So I won't take too much of your time. I do want to share a few things, though, which bothers our industry, and also some solutions how we can go forward. As you can see from this picture, you're never too old to learn how to separate waste, and we should learn our children as soon as we can to do so in an appropriate way. Just a very quick overview on with regard to what we stand for in the Biogas Association. We represent 28 countries within Europe, more than 7,000 stakeholders. We are representing well over 75,000 jobs, and as such, we are, and that is maybe not known to many people, as industry as big as the solar or wind industry. And if you count that the composting industry as well, actually together we are bigger. And why that's not recognized is that we are very localized. We are solving problems locally by treating the waste and creating at the same time energy. Now, what I would like to do is first of all show you a few examples on how things can work. So I've selected two installations. One is the Orga World in the Netherlands, which is producing from household waste, so the organic fraction of household waste, energy. And they actually making biomethane of that, took some quite large quantities, 1,200 cubes an hour of biomethane, say natural gas, bio-natural gas within the gas grid. They separate on-site the organic fraction, and then they use it. And of course, the digestate is being used as much as they can to fertilize soil or compost it. Another great example is Hara in Norway, where they actually are doing the same, separating it at the factory itself. And they are producing 400 cubes an hour of biomethane. And the beauty of this system is that they have this large screening procedure. So they take out all the plastics, all other waste. They leave the organic fraction. And with the energy, they are actually driving their own trucks, which are collecting the waste. So to have a full circular city approach. This is a huge success, only they do have a problem, and that's the cost. And I'll come to that a little bit later. Then I put another picture in there, and that's the bioenergy, because we as industry, when we produce the energy, we can do more than just only producing the biogas. We can also make bioenergy, so we can use that for the maritime sector or the transport sector. So if you look at Europe, what is the current use with regard to feedstocks within our industry? You see it at the pie chart, but it's around about 12% of all our feedstock is now organic fraction or food waste. This can go up quite to some extent. At this moment, we produce 0.36 BCM, so that is billion cubic meters. That sounds a lot, but it can go up much more, or 3.8 terawatt hours. The potential use, though, is almost 20-fold. And this 20-fold is only accounting for the current based organic fraction which is around. If we improve within Europe, as what the previous speaker was saying in Romania, then there will be even a larger portion of organic fraction and food waste available for us to treat. Now, if you look at the organic fraction, and it has been told before, one of the largest problem is the plastic waste. It is very, very difficult to remove, and if we can remove it, and we can remove it with some best practice already around, it is very costly. And here you have this paradigm or paradigm that we can treat it. We actually can help to treat the food waste, but then we are seen actually by the surrounding as being bad because we are handling waste, although we are trying to solve a problem. So there's one part that we are trying to solve it, and we play a very important role in that. But then we are seen as one of the polluters which we are not. So we can actually create the energy, and we can take out the plastics to a very, say, large amount. But that is very costly. Then the second one, which is really bothering our industry, is if we want to do this right, and we want to do this right because we care about the environment, we need to put in all the screening and heavy screening equipment in there, which is very costly, which makes the energy we produce very costly. And at the same time, they're saying, yes, biogas or biomethane or the products you derive from there, it's too expensive. So this is the problem. We are there to help. We can actually help to a large extent, but we need to pay actually to make sure that we can reach all this. So the solution would actually be here is not that the biogas or the composting industry is going to pay for all these techniques, but a polluter pays principle. We must ensure that the packaging industry is going to be feeling the burden of removing the plastics from the organic waste, so that they not only on one hand can choose for different type of packaging, which is better for the environment, but also pay for the fact that this plastic needs to be taken out again. It cannot be in that way that the composting or the biogas industry is seen as very expensive because they do the right thing. So as David already said in the beginning of this webinar, it comes at a huge cost if we have a lot of plastic within our food waste. So we must be sure, make sure that we have the best available technique in place, and that is possible already, to take out almost all, if not all, plastic where we can, to make sure that we can use all the nutrients and the energy which is in there in the food waste to the better of the people and the environment. So to summarize, the potential is there for renewable gas, and the sector can scale up, but we are there in a difficult area where we have to pay ourselves to take out the plastics, to do it better for the environment, whilst we actually solving the problem from which is caused by say further up in the chain. The soil improvers are available, so we can make sure that the digestate or composting can be used to increase the humus content, the carbon content, or the nutrient content in the soil. And within that, if we are creating the biogas, we are a very important cornerstone in the defossilization which we need to achieve in Europe. So our industry or the composting industry can contribute heavily. And the positive thing is we can start right away. It is not something which is far away on the horizon. It is just around the corner, and we can start to collect, to treat, and to make sure that there is renewable energy available and also nutrients for our soil. The infrastructure is there, and that way we can contribute to the Green Deal. That's about it.
Thank you, Harman. Thank you for that, and it's good to hear from your voice the need for the composting and the biogas industries to collaborate and to work together. You're both in this together. Now, I would invite all the panelists to turn their screens on. Mr. Bogovič, you are there. Are there questions, Mr. Bogovič, which you firstly would like to address to any of the panelists? Mr. Bogovič, we cannot hear you.
To Liliana, to Romania. I was in Romania a few times as mayor, and in my city Krško we had partnership with Črna from Dobrođa region, Constanța, yeah. And I saw these cases, and it's really a lot of things to do. And my question is, on the basis of my experiences as mayor, are involved young people in this process? Because our experiences in my municipality, when we started after 2000 with these things, it was very important to make a very good partnership with schools, with pupils, and they were the biggest teacher for people in Slovenia. So I think it's very important to involve young people in this waste collection and separate collection.
Yes, indeed. The children and the students are the best vehicle to give our message to the population. And of course, we have educational programs and communication campaigns, and young people are involved because they want to be involved. They are very receptive, and they can bring message further. This related to separate collection and recycling. Of course, related to bio-waste, we didn't have to much so far. We didn't do too many steps, but related to separate collection and recycling, yes, we involve the young generation, and we will continue to do, because they have to be involved. It's their future. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've been patiently listening to all the speakers for the last hour or so, and you have Mr. Pellegrini from the European Commission here in front of you. You have Marco Ricci from Italy, and Harman Decker, myself, and Liliana from Romania. So I'm going to say, if you wish to ask a question to any of the panelists, please raise your hand. On the top of your screen, you will see raise your hand sign, raise your hand and signal that you wish to speak. And so you will be given the floor to ask your question. For Mr. Pellegrini, while I'm waiting for that, may I ask you, Mr. Pellegrini, what can we do as the biogas and the composting industry to collaborate with you over the next months to ensure that this issue is sorted out? What do you need from us?
I mean, we are, so first of all, I think there is, I mean, it is very important also to see how, even the example of Romania, there are, as I mentioned, several obligations which are kicking in, which they are already having an effect. For example, I mentioned that there is an obligation of separate collection starting from 2023, but we see that in many member states, are anticipating that deadline. Romania mentioned that it will be in 2021. There are many like Italy, but many others which they have already this obligation since a number of years. So that's, I think, is to share best practices is already one good thing you can do. Then now on the specific issue of contamination by plastic, I think it's to gather as much data as possible, quantitative data. As I said, I mean, we're going to look into it. As I mentioned, I mean, unfortunately, at the moment, I don't know if the overworked is the right term, but certainly this is my status at the moment. So really, I'm trying to do my best to cope with I don't know how many legislative revisions. And we will do also our best to look into that, because I always believe that we should focus always on the big things. And indeed, that in one of my slides, I've mentioned that this is by far the largest waste stream of municipal waste. So clearly, we have an interest to make sure that we tackle that waste stream. And already the fact that there will be separate collection is a good point. As I mentioned, the Commission will have to look into also the possibility to set recycling targets in the future. But also, I think what is important is that even if we have recycling targets and if we have waste collection obligations, then it's important that whatever we collect and we recycle has to be clean, as you said. So that's indeed, I took note, I mean, some, but I took note of the concern you have expressed, notably also the fact that the amount of plastics, there are very different thresholds which are mandated in the different member states. I mean, the example of, I think it was Catalonia you mentioned in Spain, and then when you compare with Italy, I mean, there are huge divergences there. So that's, I think, is what can be done at this stage. And so to share with us more data, and maybe to also meet with the Joint Research Center, which is the scientific body of the European Commission.
Thank you for that, Mr. Pellegrini. I have a question here for all of the panelists from Mirko Barbero, who is a policy officer at the Soil Protection and Sustainable Land Use office in DG Envy, who you may know, Mr. Pellegrini, is maybe a colleague of yours. But he's asking the panel, the circularity gap that there is between soil, food and bio-waste. How do we close that gap? What are the gaps and how do we close it? And apart from the question of we've raised today, what are the urgent actions which we can take to prevent the soil, food and bio-waste issue becoming a source of increasing contamination? So this was Mr. Barbero's questions addressed really to the whole panel. Maybe Marco, you would like to take that up?
I try. It's not easy to answer. I would say how to overcome the circularity gap. I'm going to give a simple answer. Try to recognize the value of digested and compost brought back to soil, first of all. And don't wait us as composting or anaerobic digestion facility able to produce 100% clean product, because this is impossible on one side. And a strategic issue, we must recognize the hidden value of these two products, because there is an enormous hidden value, which you also introduced this morning, David, saying, well, we have them back to soils because we're losing 50 million tons of topsoil every year. That's one thing. The other thing is try to avoid us to become vectors for pollution, which prevent everything which is coming into our facilities by the feedstock. And don't forget, there are other polluters which we cannot do anything for, which are food, atmospheric plastics coming from water and so on. So this is another issue, but of course, we have to link the soil strategy to the bio-waste strategy sooner or later. And why not starting from the economy? So recognize it.
Yes, it's always been a subject of great amazement to me how policymakers ignore the biosphere. They all talk about the mechanosphere and recycling plastics and recycling metals and glass, but actually the biosphere is about the food that we eat, the air and the water that we drink, and is far, far more essential to get right. We are coming to the close because at 1:30, 2:30 European time, we close. Mr. Bogovič, do you have any last remarks, or Mr. Decker, Liliana, any last remarks before we close?
In few sentences, we saw that first of all that there are big differences in waste management in Europe. So I think it's necessary to fulfill this gap, also to invest through cohesion funds in countries in which we have this gap. On another side, in European Union, we have ambitious legislation, Green Deal, circular economy, farm to fork, waste package, and we must follow this. And I think that through improving this collection system, quality of food feedstock, as we heard, this is the key way. Here is very important the use of bioplastic, biodegradable bioplastic, and I think here is also opportunity inside this circular economy also for agriculture. And as we saw, we have when we have pure waste, we have good solutions through composting and through producing biogas, both components, soil and energy we need. And I think that we must go in these directions. We have solutions, so it's time to implement it.
Excellent. Yes, Harman, did you have a last word?
Well, yes, I would say that if you look at if there is 34% of food waste around, that we can play, so the composting and the biogas industry, a great role within closing the circularity cap. So yes, we can make the solution for the soil. Yes, we can make a solution for the bioenergy. And of course, not only in food waste, we can do a little bit more than that. But still, I think we are important. And as Marco was saying, there are so many positive externalities linked to it by rural economy stimulation. We are localized. We can help actually the cities, the local communities to go and be environmentally friendly and be sustainable for the future.
Thank you. On that optimistic note, let me thank the five speakers who have been with us this morning. Let me thank Ilias and Charles for the organization. Thank you, Mr. Pellegrini, for dedicating a part of your very busy agenda, and Mr. Bogovič for also being available for this. And we will follow up and we will help provide the Commission with the information that you need to be able to sort this problem out before it becomes a major emergency. I would like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in, and the slides will be available for you all and sent round to you all very shortly. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Bye. Keep in touch. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.